This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome, everyone, to the very first episode of the Stories of the Civil War podcast. My name is Chris Mowery, and you may know me best from some of my YouTube content on channels like Vlogging Through History, Stories of the Civil War, Stories of the Great War. I've also appeared on several episodes of Unbelievable with Dan Aykroyd on the History Channel, as well as the two-part docudrama that they did on the Great War. But I am really excited about this because this is my favorite topic to talk about. It's the American Civil War. It's what I've been in love with studying, going all the way back to childhood, and it's the thing that I love to talk about the most. So we're going to dive into this today, and I thought to start things off, I wanted to do a biography highlighting one of the most fascinating figures from the American Civil War. And it's a man that not a lot of people know nearly enough about. See, in the American Civil War, there were a lot of different ways you could rise to a level of command. Obviously, the easiest way was to get a West Point education, attend the United States Military Academy, and many of the highest-ranking officers on both sides went to West Point. But there were other ways as well. You could be in a prominent political position, which allowed you to get an appointment, or you might be wealthy and political and use your influence and your money to help raise a unit of soldiers that might put you in position to get some rank. You also might just get elected at the company level to captain or even to a colonelcy in some regiments. And the man we're going to talk about today, I think, is the best representation of the political general. This is the only political general for the Union who rose to the level, albeit temporary, of Army command. His name was John Alexander Logan, and I think he was the best political general on either side during the American Civil War. So today we're going to dive into the story of John Alexander Logan, a man who begins as a fiery anti-abolitionist congressman from Southern Illinois, and his story will crescendo when he plants the first Union flag inside the fallen fortress of Vicksburg on July 4th, 1863. And after the guns fall silent in the American Civil War, he will rally a grieving nation by helping create what we now honor as Memorial Day. John Alexander Logan drew his first breath on February 9th, 1826 in a log cabin just outside the frontier town of Murfreesboro, Illinois. A place that his neighbors still call Little Egypt for its rich bottomland soil, its cultural tilt toward the South. Southern Illinois is very much a pro-South, a pro-slave rights, slave-owning rights part of the country at this time. And he becomes a product of that. His father, Dr. John Logan, was a self-educated Scots-Irish immigrant who had prospered as a country doctor, a farmer, and a 3-term member of the Illinois legislature. From him, young Jack inherited both restless energy and a conviction that in America, even the obscure may rise on their own merits. A private tutor handled the basics of his education, but at Shiloh College, the 16-year-old discovered two lifelong passions: classical rhetoric and bare-knuckle debating. Classmates would say that he could talk a bird off a limb, a gift that would serve him well in war and politics alike. When war with Mexico erupted in 1846, the now 20-year-old Logan volunteered as a second lieutenant in Company H of the 1st Illinois Volunteers. He marched the Santa Fe Trail as regimental quartermaster, battled a near-fatal case of measles, and came home without having ever fired a shot. But he had gained a soldier's perspective on discipline and on hardship. Back in Jackson County, he leveraged his family name to win election as a circuit court clerk in 1849 while he read law under his uncle, the former Lieutenant Governor Alexander Jenkins. 2 years later, he graduated from the University of Louisville's law department, passed the Illinois bar, and opened a practice noted for fiery jury summations. But politics was his real arena. In quick succession, he became the prosecuting attorney for the 3rd Judicial District, an Illinois state representative, and by the age of 33, a United States congressman. Constituents hailed him as Egypt's spokesman, the loudest Democratic voice defending their economic interests and the white supremacist social order. Logan's most notorious achievement came in 1853 when he authored the Negro Exclusion Bill in Illinois. This barred free black people from settling in Illinois and punished those who overstayed 10 days. He railed from the floor at Springfield, quote, "It was never intended that whites and blacks should stand in equal relation," end quote. And this won cheers for him back home, but condemnation upstate. His tone only sharpened when he went to Washington as a freshman congressman. On December 9, 1859, Representative Logan thundered against abolitionists and boasted of enforcing the Fugitive Slave Act. He said this, quote, "Every fugitive slave that has been arrested in Illinois has been seized by Democrats. We are willing to perform that dirty work," end quote. Northern papers mocked him as Dirty Work Logan, but the nickname only improved his image back in Little Egypt, where voters prided themselves on rugged loyalty to the Constitution, slavery included. Still, one principle ran deeper than race or party for John Logan: an unshakable belief that the Union must endure. When Southern colleagues began murmuring secession after Abraham Lincoln's election, Logan bristled at the idea, warning a friend that those who dreamed of an easy divorce for the nation would, quote, "wake to the conviction of their sad error," end quote. That tension between a fierce unionism but an equally fierce prejudice in John Logan's heart set the stage for his dramatic wartime transformation. When the Civil War began, Logan was a United States congressman from the state of Illinois. He was in Washington when the movements of the armies began, and on Sunday, July 21st, 1861, like many members of Congress and many of their family members, Logan went out to the Manassas battlefield to see the fight. But unlike those other members of Congress, John Alexander Logan could not stand by and watch while his countrymen tore the nation apart. He grabbed a discarded musket, stood beside members of the 2nd Michigan Infantry, and then helped carry the wounded from the field. His first, albeit impromptu, baptism of fire in the American Civil War. He returned to Little Egypt and mounted a wagon in the Marion Courthouse Square and vowed to stand or fall with the Union. Within weeks, he had recruited the 31st Illinois Infantry, mustered it into federal service on September 19, 1861, and because of his dark hair and dark eyes, he earned the soldier's nickname, Black Jack Logan. The regiment's trial came at the Battle of Belmont on November 7th. Logan led from the front, had his horse shot from under him, and was cited by both General Grant and General McClernand for, quote, largely contributing to the success of the day, end quote. The winter brought Grant's twin strikes on Forts Henry and Donelson. And by February 12, 1862, Logan's men were posted on the extreme right of the Union ring that was tightening around the earthworks at Fort Donelson. At dawn on the 15th of February, Confederate General Gideon Pillow launched an attack that came straight at the 31st Illinois. A mini ball punched through Logan's left shoulder and another tore through his right thigh. The regimental line began to waver. Logan wheeled his horse, lifted his hat, and shouted, "Boys, give us death, but not dishonor." It would not be the last time that Logan would rally soldiers and save the day. Surgeons bound his wounds, but he refused to be evacuated, steering his regiment that was now known as the Dirty First until ammunition was gone and blood loss dropped him from the saddle. By nightfall, his regiment had suffered 31 killed, 117 wounded, and 28 missing. Yet the breakout was crushed, and Donelson surrendered the following morning. From his hospital cot, Logan dictated a letter home insisting that the fight proved, quote, "the Republic is worth every drop of my blood," end quote. Grant endorsed that conviction and recommended him for promotion. He said a braver or more gallant man is not to be found. On March 21st, 1862, Logan received his first star as a brigadier general, and on the 2nd of April, he resigned his congressional seat to serve in the Union Army full-time. The political firebrand had become a bloodied field officer. Now, what I want to do is fast forward to 1863 because this is where we get into the meat of the story of John Logan, Civil War general. When the campaign season in 1863 dawned, Logan was now wearing 2 stars as a major general, and he was back in the saddle at the head of the 3rd Division in the 17th Army Corps. His critics had largely fallen silent because the former congressman's valor at Fort Donelson had shown that he was no mere political general. He was a guy who knew how to fight. Grant's grand design for the Vicksburg campaign opened with a daring river crossing at Bruinsburg. Logan's men led the inland swing along the Utica Road, trudging through ankle-deep dust, as it was described, in the blistering Mississippi heat. Sergeant Ira Blanchard wrote that the column advanced with one eye open for Johnny Reb and the other for water. 2 days later, that vigilance paid off at Raymond on the 12th of May. General Gregg's Texans thought they had laid a trap for the lead elements of Logan's division. As the men of the 20th Ohio held the line at 14 Mile Creek, the support on their right flank began to waver. Sergeant Osborne Oldroyd, who kept a diary of the events of the Vicksburg campaign, he was a member of Company E of the 20th Ohio, and he wrote in his diary what happened as the line to the right of the 20th began to waver. He said, "The regiment to the right of us was giving way, but just as the line was wavering and about to be hopelessly broken, Logan dashed up, and with the shriek of an eagle, turned them back to their places, which they regained and held. Had it not been for Logan's timely intervention, who was continually riding up and down the line, firing the men with his own enthusiasm, our line would undoubtedly have been broken." Logan's division held the line, and they won the day at Raymond. The victory secured an important crossroads, but more importantly, it opened the road to the state capital. Riding the momentum, Grant pivoted to the east. In a driving rain on the 14th of May, Logan's and Crocker's divisions stormed the earthworks around Jackson. By late afternoon, the Union colors waved from the dome of the Mississippi State House. Rail depots burned through the night, severing Confederate communications and blinding Joe Johnston's hopes of relieving Pemberton's men at Vicksburg. With Jackson now neutralized, Grant's column wheeled west toward Vicksburg. The collision with Pemberton's men came on the 16th of May at Champion Hill, and once again John Logan was right in the thick of it. His division thrust into the Confederate left, and that proved decisive. They pinched off the only escape route and drove the enemy back toward the Big Black River. A staff officer recalled Logan, quote, "riding like a black-plumed hawk over the smoke," end quote, urging every regiment forward. The battered rebels fell back into the river fortress at Vicksburg. Grant tried to end the siege quickly with assaults on the 19th and again on the 22nd of May. In that assault on the 22nd at around 2 p.m., Logan's division, who held the center of Grant's position, surged down the Jackson Road toward Stockade Redan. They reached the ditch, but couldn't climb any further. The day closed with heavy casualties and the grim decision to settle in to a siege. Weeks passed in a grinding routine of trenches, sharpshooters, and sapping. On the 25th of June, Union engineers packed 2,200 pounds of powder beneath the 3rd Louisiana Redan, which was, again, right across from Logan's division. When the mine exploded, Logan's men leapt into the smoking crater, seized a toehold, and dug in inches from the Confederate parapets, tightening the noose another notch. Finally, on the 4th of July, Pemberton surrendered the garrison at Vicksburg. Grant chose Logan's division to lead the formal occupation. Under a merciless sun, the dirty First planted the stars and stripes atop the Warren County Courthouse. Even skeptical newspapers conceded Logan was first in the captured city, and his wife Mary proudly echoed the claim to anyone who would listen. For a brief moment, Logan served as the military governor of Vicksburg, arranging rations for starving Confederates and for newly freed civilians alike, a glimpse of the broader reconciliation that he envisioned in the post-war world. But new campaigns called for John Logan. The black-plumed hawk would soon lift his wings toward Chattanooga, and beyond that, in the rugged hills of northern Georgia. The ruins of Vicksburg were still smoking when Washington wired the news that John Logan had been elevated to the permanent command of the 15th Corps, replacing his mentor, William Tecumseh Sherman, who moved up to take command of the entire Army of the Tennessee. By early November of 1863, Logan and his men were rattling eastward in boxcars toward the besieged city of Chattanooga, Tennessee. 2 weeks later, as Grant opened his Great Relief Offensive, Logan's corps trudged through the fog beneath Lookout Mountain and took its place for Sherman's main effort toward Tunnel Hill on the 25th of November. All morning, his Illinois and Iowa regiments clawed at Patrick Cleburne's trenches. Though the crest held, their hammering pinned Confederate reserves that might have stymied Grant's breakthrough on Missionary Ridge. After the victory at Chattanooga, winter brought regrouping, promotions, and for Logan, the responsibility of leading 17,000 veterans into Sherman's Atlanta campaign. At Dallas on May 28, 1864, the blackjack mentality, aggressive, unrelenting, and personal, shone through again. His men fought unaided for hours, securing the crossroads that kept Sherman's front moving toward the south. Week by week, they drove Joe Johnston back, Resaca, New Hope Church, Kennesaw Mountain, and Chattahoochee. By July 22nd, the Blue Lines ringed Atlanta's eastern flank. That afternoon, Confederate General John Bell Hood hurled William Hardee's corps in a sweeping flank attack. Amid the chaos, a courier galloped in with the unimaginable news. Major General James B. McPherson was dead. Logan, the senior corps commander, swung into the breach wearing McPherson's green line sash. With his hat in his hand, astride his warhorse Slasher, he shouted words that survivors never forgot. McPherson and revenge. The cry rolled down the works, stiffened the wavering ranks, until the breakthrough was sealed and the Confederates were driven back. For 4 intense days, John Logan directed the entire Army of the Tennessee, the first non-West Pointer ever to command a Union field army. But on July 26, Sherman, who was wary of political generals, appointed West Pointer Oliver Howard to the permanent position. Logan accepted the decision without any open protest, but he later confessed that the demotion cut deeper than any bullet wound. In the end, duty prevailed. 2 days later, on July 28th, Logan's 15th Corps, now the Army's right wing, dug in along a low ridge near a country chapel named Ezra Church. Hood's columns attacked frontally and on the flank, but Logan's men repelled 5 assaults, inflicting thousands of casualties for only hundreds of their own men lost. And they preserved Sherman's push forward toward the last railroad lifeline south of the city. The final test came at Jonesboro on August 31st into September 1st. Logan's men cracked the defenses on the first day, severed the Macon and Western Railroad, and ensured that Atlanta's evacuation and surrender took place on September 2nd, 1864. It was a victory that echoed all the way to the White House and helped secure Abraham Lincoln's re-election. With Atlanta now in Union hands, Logan accepted a brief furlough in order to go home and stump for President Lincoln. But even politics couldn't hold him long. On January 11, 1865, he re-reported to Sherman at Savannah and resumed command of the 15th Corps, now hardened by 2 full years of battle. South Carolina's swamps offered the Corps its next test. Wading waist-deep across the Salkehatchie and up to the Congaree, Logan prodded his men with a simple order: forward, no stop, till Columbia. One private recalled that General Logan seemed to ride the water like a heron, Columbia fell without much of a fight on February 17th. The State House dome gleamed red in the torchlight of abandoned cotton bales. Sherman's armies now pivoted to the north. Roads dissolved in sleet, but Logan pressed on through Fayetteville and reached the Pine Barrens outside of Bentonville, North Carolina by March 19th. There, Joe Johnston tried one last ambush. On the battle's second day, Logan's 15th Corps lunged against the Confederate left, rolling it back and forcing Johnston to retreat toward Raleigh. A staff officer wrote that Logan, quote, drove with the same fury he showed at Champion Hill, only now the end was clearly in sight, end quote. April 13th brought blue flags into Raleigh. 6 days later, news arrived of Lincoln's assassination. The camps fell silent, the jubilation of victory replaced by a stunned sorrow. Logan issued General Orders No. 19, directing his soldiers to remember the fallen chief by bearing themselves with double restraint. It was a directive his men observed so faithfully that locals marveled at the Army's discipline. On April 26th, at Bennett Place, Logan stood behind Sherman as General Johnston signed the surrender of nearly 90,000 Confederate soldiers, the largest capitulation of the war. Diary entries from the scene note Logan's compressed lips and moist eyes when Sherman extended his hand to Johnston, sealing the bargain. 2 weeks later, beneath newly unfurled national colors, Logan read his farewell address to the 15th Corps. He praised their valor, but urged mercy, quote, spare the disarmed, feed the hungry, and let it be said that the soldiers of the Union knew how to conquer and forgive, end quote. Though Logan had been replaced as commander of the Army of the Tennessee, General Sherman recognized that Logan deserved to have an army of his own, though he never got the opportunity full time. When it came time for the Grand Review in Washington on May 24th, Logan was given the honor of leading the Army of the Tennessee down the streets of Washington, D.C. at the head of his veterans. No longer a fiery congressman searching for a place in history, no longer the man speaking out against abolition in the halls of Congress. This was a proven general who had stirred his men from Chickasaw Bayou to Bentonville. Peace had returned, but John Logan's public battles were far from over. He swapped his army overcoat for a statesman's frock once again. He won election to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1866, this time as a Republican, and carried his wartime reputation straight to the floors of Congress. 4 years later, Illinois sent him to the United States Senate, first from 1871 to 1877, and again from 1879 until his death, making him one of the most durable political figures of the Reconstruction era. As National Commander of the Grand Army of the Republic, a veterans organization for men who had fought in the Civil War, Logan issued General Order No. 11 on May 5, 1868, directing veterans to decorate soldiers' graves on May 30th. Let us guard their graves with sacred vigilance, he wrote. He created what Americans had soon come to call Decoration Day, what we today call Memorial Day. Now, I know that there are a number of stories about how Memorial Day began in both North and South, and those are all absolutely true, but the first official nationwide recognition came from the pen of John Alexander Logan. In the Senate, he fought just as fiercely for the living. He championed expanding pensions for Union veterans, their widows, and orphans, and spoke out remarkably. For a one-time anti-abolitionist, he spoke out on behalf of black soldiers whose benefits lagged behind those of their white comrades. His stature peaked in 1884 when the Republican National Convention paired him with James Blaine on the presidential ticket. The campaign was hard fought, but Democrat Grover Cleveland prevailed by a razor-thin margin, relegating Logan to the role of loyal opposition. 2 years later, illness struck without warning. After a brief, agonizing decline, John Alexander Logan died in Washington, D.C. on December 26, 1886, at the age of 60. His body lay in state beneath the Capitol dome before solemn funeral rites in the Senate chamber on December 30th and 31st. Thousands filed past the flag-draped casket to honor the man they knew as Black Jack Logan. Even in death, he kept writing. Chicago unveiled an immense equestrian statue in Grant Park in 1897, and Washington, D.C. followed with a bronze memorial that anchors Logan's Circle, dedicated on April 9, 1901, by President McKinley. Today, his legacy lives wherever poppies and flags adorn military graves, and wherever veterans claim the benefits he once thundered for on the Senate floor. He also lives on through the legacy of his son. I am a resident of Youngstown, Ohio, and here in our cemetery, our main cemetery in Youngstown, lies the body of John Alexander Logan, Jr., Black Jack's son, who is a recipient of the Medal of Honor for action in which he was killed during the Philippine-American War. And the picture of John Logan Jr. is one of our proud images that hangs from a lamppost for our hometown heroes. I think for me, the real story of John Alexander Logan is the reminder that citizenship is an unfinished march. Yes, there's courage on the battlefield, but there's also the courage to evolve in your mind and in your words and deeds once the shooting stops. It shows that a man who once fought to keep blacks as second-class citizens could put his life on the line for union, but then afterwards lend his voice and his actions to giving those same black citizens an opportunity at equality. As we close this episode, I want to invite you to live a life worthy of the calling of a man like John Logan. Sometime this week, take an opportunity to visit your local cemetery. Walk through the graves. Read the names. Place a flower. Keep the promise that John Logan wrote for us. Let no vandalism of neglect testify that we have forgotten the cost of a free and undivided republic. Thanks for listening.